Welcome to tonight's live stream. I am going to get started in a moment, and I just need to let everybody on social media know that the stream is currently on the air. Hey, Mr. Chris, glad to see you here. Okay, I've let everybody know that the stream is currently on the air, and I'm want to get into some perfunctory before I get into tonight's show. And I want everybody to go out here and head over to Amazon and pick up John Haynes, 1987, and John Haynes, Godbreaker, and head over to lulu.com and pick up John Haynes at Death's Door. Now, with that being said about the SJS Direct topics, I'm going to also talk about the SJS Direct 2024 catalog. And right now, again, I have all three of the books laid out. I have Esteem Horror in the Hamptons, Isis Dark Incubus, and John Haynes Illuminati, all laid out for their paperback and ebook formats. And I was looking at some sketches that Mike Williams presented to me as related to the cover for John Haynes Illuminati, and it looks absolutely fantastic. And he took the idea of making that homage to Action Jackson and has really taken things to another level. So the covers are getting done. I talked to Bill Walko a couple of months ago, so I'm going to talk to him again regarding the Isis and Esteem covers. So everything is looking like it's on the road to getting ready for 2024. And I'm thinking of, and I'm also working on a 2025 book, which is Esteem, Season of the Witch Girl. So I'm working on projects, and I'm also getting ready to work on another comic script. So there's a lot going on with SJS Direct. So guys, there's going to be a lot of great content getting ready to come out soon. So working hard behind the scenes on books for the SJS Direct catalog. And this was a video, that live stream that I had basically had on my mind for some time. Now, tonight I was going to do a completely different topic. I was going to do one about the difference between dating and courting, but I may save that for another live stream. And I wanted to save that because this has just been on my mind for some time, and it's something I really wanted to just really talk about. Now, this was a live stream I wanted to talk about after my Isom #2 barbecue, because a viewer wanted to say that I had some bias against Eric July, and this person basically doesn't understand that there is a difference between me, Eric July, and Comicsgate. And in this live stream, I'm going to go in depth on the difference between myself, Eric July, and Comicsgate, and the ideals regarding all three of us. Now, when it comes to this whole drama regarding comics on social media, you have a lot of guys who are upset about what they call social justice warriors taking over the big two comic companies, Marvel and DC. And because they are upset about these social justice warriors coming into Marvel and DC, they believe that these people basically want to push their agendas in between the panels of most comics. And this is where these individuals believe that these comics are so-called woke. And because they believe these comics are what they call woke, they say that these comics are not about staying true to the characters and staying true to the material at all. And that's the reason why they say that these comics are just absolutely terrible. But when I started to really take a look at it, after looking at many of their videos from about 2016 to about 2019, I began to see things very differently. Now, when it comes to these individuals who are a part of Comicsgate, they want to go out here and make the claim, oh, these books are so what they call woke. But from a publisher's perspective, I just look at these creators that they've hired as extremely inexperienced. Now, most of these what they call woke comic creators are extremely inexperienced individuals who really don't have much in terms of creative ability due to their lack of life experience or their just plain lack of skill as related to being comic book writers and even comic book artists. And this is the talking point many in the group of Comicsgate really don't want to talk about. No, they want to go out here and polarize things and talk about how things are political, but that really undermines their entire whole message as related to why the comic book industry is struggling right now. Because as they sit there and try to make things political and polarized, they do this for two reasons. One, they do it because this allows many of them who have YouTube channels to get clicks and views as related to the ongoing drama. And two, they do this because they believe that this will be the thing that will allow them to use YouTube and social media as a springboard in order to get attention for their independent comic projects. Now, this is the foundation of what Comicsgate is all about and what Eric July is all about. Both of these individuals and institutions, they basically want to go out here and say that because the mainstream comics are so what they call woke, the industry is really going to wind up falling apart as a result of it. And the only way for the industry to be saved, in their opinion, is if people go out here and buy their independent comic projects. This is the covert contract that they try to sell most people on as related to promoting their independent projects. What they do is go out here and try to promote the narrative. Oh, these mainstream comics are so woke due to the social justice warriors out here looking to push their social justice narratives and identity politics inside of their books. And they want us to believe that because these individuals are pushing these what they call social justice narratives in the pages of Marvel and DC Comics, this is the thing that is hurting the industry. But in actuality, when you start to take that objective perspective from a panoramic view, you start to see that what's really hurt the comic book industry is the fact that you've had no real editorial structure at Marvel and DC with publishing experience since about 2001. Now, back in 2001, that's when Joe Quesada wound up replacing, I believe his name was Tom DeFalco over at Marvel. And in 2002, DC wound up replacing Jeanette Kahn, the longtime president of DC Comics, and was Paul Levitz, and they were replaced with Dan Didio. And both of these individuals did not have any sort of publishing experience. And because they did not have any sort of publishing experience, they did not know how to set a course and a direction for the Marvel and DC catalog the way a seasoned editor-in-chief who is familiar with the material would be able to do. And because that they didn't have a seasoned editor-in-chief in charge who knew the characters and the catalog of books that were being published, this is what led to a rapid decline in quality at Marvel and DC because they had really inexperienced people in editorial, and because they had inexperienced people inside of editorial, this is what led to the complete decline of Marvel and DC Comics as these new editors-in-chief came in charge and started going out here looking to implement all kinds of gimmick storylines. And those gimmick storylines wound up alienating a lot of the regular customers for Marvel and DC Comics. And this was started again way before anything before Comicsgate. The foundations for a lot of what we see in modern comics is due to the just incompetent editorial that has been running Marvel and DC. And after Joe Quesada left and they brought in Axel Alonso, Marvel got even worse. And Dan Didio went out here and was looking to do shock storylines like Graduation Day and Identity Crisis. And this had been going on since about 2002. And the Marvel and DC brands went on a major sales decline from 2002 to about 2016 due to really bad editorial gimmick storylines in both companies. And this came to a head for many of the guys who are a part of Comicsgate with the all new, all different Marvel. Now, many of these guys didn't have much complaints about DC or Marvel, which were in a free fall for over a decade as related to sales, but they started to get upset with the all new, all different Marvel, which was a reboot of the Secret Wars, because they were pushing token diversity characters. And these token diversity characters were all about so-called representation. And this so-called representation was, again, very poorly done due to the incompetent and inexperienced editorial. And it's the inexperienced editorial that did damage to the Marvel brand, leading to them having a 90% sales drop. And the main reason why they had the 90% sales drop was all because of, one, you have inexperienced editors who don't know the catalog or the characters, and two, you have these inexperienced editors going out here and hiring extremely inexperienced and grossly unqualified writers to start working on these comics. And you also had very inexperienced editors who really did not understand what being the editor of a comic book company was all about. No, they didn't understand that how comics were created or sold, and they didn't understand the most important thing about a comic book is a page. A page basically is a reflection of a creator, because when you are a creator out here, your page is going to be the thing that tells the story about you and about your skills as a creator. It's your page that basically is going to let everybody know what you can bring as related to telling a story. And the reason why many people as related to comics today aren't focused on page is because we got a lot of people who really don't understand that comic book creation isn't just a job. No, comic creation is a craft, and it's a craft that you have to learn over an extended period of time. And sadly, people don't know that it's a craft because over the last 25, 30 years, we haven't really had anybody to go out here and pass the craft down, because in the boom era of the 1990s, craft was abandoned because many comic companies were focused on trying to get as many sales as they wanted from the extreme period of the 1990s. Now, the early 1990s were a big period for comics. I mean, they had the biggest sales on many books at places like Image and Marvel and DC. And again, they made plenty of money on those comics. But sadly, there was not much focus on craft. And because there was not much focus on craft, there was nobody there really to pass down the craft of storytelling inside of comics. And this is where we started to see the problems as related to what goes on today, because what's going on today has to do with a major problem we have as related to people not understanding it's a craft. And many people have come into the business of comics, like what they call these SJWs, but I will call inexperienced people. And these inexperienced people, they are thinking that comics are a gateway to a stepping stone to other jobs in the entertainment industry. Some of these people, they have stars in their eyes and they're spellbound, and they're thinking that, oh, if I do a comic, it will lead to them being able to go out here and create a deal that will get them to Hollywood. Now, as again, a writer of over 25 years of experience and a publisher with over a decade of experience, I have seen a lot of people have this delusion as related to their stories, whether it be a prose fiction book or a comic book. And what they do is create a covert contract with the entertainment industry, believing that this is going to be a gateway for them to a lucrative deal. And because there was a little bit of a boom with the Netflix going on at the time as related to streaming and them making speculative these option deals, some people thought, oh, this was going to be a gateway to Hollywood with their concepts, not understanding how the business of entertainment works. Now, as someone, again, who has been a writer for over 25 years and a publisher for a decade and studied the entertainment industry for over 25 years, I know how the business works. And I know that an option isn't a sale, and an option isn't something any creator wants to aspire to, because what an option is a deal that is saying that, oh, this person is optioning to buy your rights. And what they're looking to do is try to find ways to raise the money in order to be able to buy the rights for your project. So this is not a deal that's getting your proper intellectual property sold for adaptation. This is a person who is having an option to say, oh, if I can go out here and possibly raise the financing, I will go out here and buy the rights to your material. And that's the worst deal you could make if you're a creator, because you're gambling on this person possibly being able to sell the rights to your property to a Prodco, and you're basically being taken out of the entire situation. And again, this is not going to lead to you getting a sale for an adaptation. And again, watch that word adaptation. An adaptation means that they are going to adapt your material, not go out here and stay true to the source material. Possibly it means they can go out here, and if they buy the rights to your material, they will make their version of your material. And again, in an option deal, this is a very bad deal to get, because you're not in any way a part of it at all. No, what's happening here is this guy is signing to buy an option to possibly be able to buy your rights, but what they're doing is going out here and shopping your material around without any agent or representative of you. And as your material's getting shopped around, what's happening is that all of the Prodcos and studios are looking at your material, and you're not going to get an opportunity to get your work in that material into one of those Prodcos or get it sold. So you really don't want an option deal, but you had a lot of these what they call SJW pros talking about how they got these options and not understanding you were just basically out here taking a bad deal that was only going to lead to you just making whatever cash they gave you. You wouldn't be able to make money in the long term if this product was basically sold. No, the person who bought the option would own a lot of the rights that they bought, because they optioned those rights for film and TV. And those people would basically be the ones who would be out here and get all the money up front, while you would get the option money up front. You wouldn't really get the residuals or any sort of part of the production budget, the money that really gets made. No, that money is money that, if you know the business, only gets made if you have an agent. So this is where the people who are what they call social justice types and woke types didn't understand the business. No, they thought they were going to go out here and take these comic projects and go out here and make big money. And a lot of people came into the business, again, very inexperienced and very green about the business. And this is where the bad comic sales wound up happening, because we had a lot of people looking to go out here and pander to different audiences. And as they looked to pander to different audiences, this is what led to a lot of the traditional comic fans winding up becoming alienated by most of the comics. And this is what led to the rise of what they call the whole Comicsgate group, who were upset over what they called a milkshake incident regarding female editor Heather Antos. I don't know what went on over that milkshake incident, but because they were making so many bad comics, this is where we had a lot of people coming out here and, again, talking about how they were out here upset about the state of comics, and they wanted to make their independent comic projects. They were going to make these independent comic projects on crowdfunding, and they thought that this would be the thing that would revolutionize the business. However, 5 years after all of these Comicsgate guys have come out with many of their independent projects, what has happened is we have not seen the big time revolution as related to the comic book industry. No, we have not seen the revolution as related to the comic book industry. Yes, a lot of these indie comics have gone out here and made good money over the last 5 years, but the entire state of the industry has gotten worse. And that's where I see, again, the whole complete failure of Comicsgate. Yes, they'll go out here and buy a lot of comics based on the political beliefs of an individual, which is really ironic because these individuals go out here and say that they're all about not being political and not being so-called woke, but that was all undermined by many of these individuals when you start to take a critical look at their actions. I mean, when you look at Comicsgate, they really go out here and they only seem to support books based on so-called on politics and the political beliefs of an individual, not on the merits of the page. I mean, this is where I start to have, again, a major difference between myself and Comicsgate, because Comicsgate talks about how it's about the merits of the material, but you really don't see them really talking too much about craft. I mean, when I think about craft these days, and I'm thinking about craft, I really want to focus on the storytelling on a page. And that's the thing that I try to focus on whenever I'm going out here and putting together a comic. Whenever I go out here and put together a comic and I want to put together a comic, I understand that my page is the most important thing as related to representing me, as related to the stories I tell. For example, I've got a page here from John Haynes at Death's Door, and this is a page that I know that I have to go out here and tell a story with. And I know that my page is the thing that's going to represent me as related to whatever story that I'm trying to tell. So whenever I go out here, I understand my page is a reflection of me and a reflection of the story I'm trying to tell. And as a craftsperson, I want to make sure that my page is the best it can be. And that's one of the things I always look to go out here and work on whenever I'm doing a page for a comic, because your pages are going to be your calling card, when you're a writer and you're writing stories. And the way you show your skills as a writer is making sure that your pages are rock solid as related to storytelling. This is something I'm not seeing really being talked about that often on Comics YouTube. No, on Comics YouTube, I really don't see a lot of guys talking that much about craft as related to page, and I really don't see them talking about how they're focusing on making their books of the highest quality. No, I see a lot of guys just complaining about Marvel and DC and oftentimes looking to, again, create another covert contract, hoping that if people at Marvel and DC see their pages, maybe they'll possibly be able to get a job at those companies. That's a thing that really irks me about Comicsgate. Again, this was a group of guys who said, oh, we want to get good stories out here. We want to go out here and get good stories to the marketplace. But the whole thing is, as I see them always complaining about Marvel and DC, meanwhile, indie books from really talented creators wind up falling through the cracks. And many of these great indie books that I have done video reviews on, I mean, I have done video reviews on so many great comics, and many of those great comics like Pumpkin and Bobby Joe, and recently I did one on Christine and many of these other great indie books. We don't hear a word from anyone from Comicsgate talking about many of these indie books. No, they all preach doom and gloom about SJWs at Marvel and DC, but don't talk about many of the folks out here who are working on their craft as related to their independent books. No, they don't talk about other creators. All they do is complain about Marvel and DC, then go out here and tout themselves as the saviors of the comic book industry with their independent projects. So that's an issue I have with Comicsgate overall. I have an issue with them as related to them saying that, oh, we want to help the industry. But if you wanted to help the industry, why aren't you going out here and talking about other great independent books? I mean, yeah, I've got comics out here, but I also go out here and try to get the word out about the other great books out here, because as a publisher, I understand one book ain't going to go out here and save this entire industry. No, it's not going to be like many people thought about as related to books like Fantastic Four #1 or Giant Size X-Men #1. No, you got a lot of folks out here who think, oh, it's going to be one book that's going to save the industry. No, it's not going to be one book that will save the industry. No, that if you look at the age of comics, there were other books being sold back in the 50s during the first slump. I mean, during that first slump, you had other kinds of books like the Archie books and the romance books. They were out here selling, not as great as they were before, but they were still doing pretty good business. And as the superhero books came on, it was the other books that were going out here building the sales to take up for the books that were struggling. Because anybody like myself who knows about publishing understands that 90% of new books fail, and it's the 10% that do well that wind up holding a business up. This is something I know from my own experience as related to publishing. A lot of times it's the man crisis and the stop simpins and the woman crises and the why 70% of Black women are single that wind up helping me be able to go out here and be able to keep making Isis and Esteem series books. So this is something that people don't want to talk about as related to Comicsgate. And again, but I will talk about it because my whole approach is I understand the business, and I understand, again, it's the 10 that pay for the 90, and it's the 10 that allow you to keep your publishing those kinds of books. And again, they don't want to talk about this because, again, some of these guys from Comicsgate, they don't really have much experience as related to publishing. No, a lot of them are just in their feelings about, oh, the superhero comics being in such horrible shape. But the reason why superhero comics are in horrible shape is due to the over almost 2 decades of inexperienced editorial and the over 2 decades of inexperienced writers and people who don't know their craft, and a lot of these people not really being seasoned enough to go out here and do the research before they go out here and put fingers to the keyboard or draw lines for a story. Now, with my background, it's completely different. I was a guy who, again, grew up with comics ever since he was 4 years old in the late 1970s. And when I was 9 years old, I wanted to go out here and make my own comics. but I didn't know how to draw, but I knew I could make pictures with words. And that was a thing that led to me building up my skills over the years. And I wasn't that great of a writer in the beginning, but I learned how to become a much better writer, studying not only comic scripts, but I also wound up back in 2002, after I published my book, first ISIS book. One of my family members gave me Sid Field screenplay, and this book has been a valuable tool for me as related to developing my craft. Now, Sid Field screenplay was the book that taught me about developing 3-act paradigms as related to setting up a story with a beginning, middle, and end. And this book was invaluable to me to learning how to write better stories. And it was a book that, again, helped me to further develop my skills as a writer. Now, another book that one of my best-selling author friends told me about back in 2009 was Robert McKee's story. And this was another book that helped me to further develop my craft as a writer and helped me to learn how to write stories with a smaller economy of words. Now, in comic book writing, you have to learn how to do something like being able to describe panels in a way where you don't use a lot of detail, something very different from a novel. And it's a skill that has helped me over the years as I've went out here learning screenwriting and learning how to go out here and develop my comic book writing craft. But I don't hear anybody again on Comics YouTube talking about craft. And again, that's a difference between me and Comicsgate and a guy like Eric July. I understand that craft is very important if you want to improve the whole conditions and the state of affairs in the comic book industry. Because the problem we have with the industry is that we've got a lot of inexperienced people who have not really sharpened their craft. And sadly, over the last 30 years, they have gone out here and learned a lot of bad habits, whether it be the art of Rob Liefeld as related to what they call his feet and proportions, or the kind of storytelling that has gone on. We've got a lot of people who really have not gone out here and put in the work to learning their craft. And that's a major problem that I see from my over 25 years of experience as a writer. I see a lot of people who come into the business, they come in based on their feelings. And as they come in based on their feelings, what happens is many of these individuals really don't focus on their craft. And because they don't focus on their craft, what happens is they go out here and they make terrible comics, whether they be these members of Comicsgate or many of these guys at Marvel and DC. And the issues I again have with these individuals is that they both sides wind up complaining about comics, and they complain about these comics, but the whole thing is they don't really develop their craft. And the way you develop your craft is, again, learning how by reading, because in order to become a better writer, you have to read. And that's something that I do with books like Robert McKee's story and Sid Field's screenplay, learn how to become a better writer. Moreover, as I'm writing stories, I also do research. And again, I don't see that kind of care, because that's what I saw when I was reading the book, The Mighty Might #2, where they talked about Horus being evil. I mean, this was a pretty solid comic as I saw it, but the whole thing is this book basically suffered from a major craft issue, and it suffered from a craft issue due to the fact that the writer didn't do the research on Horus, the Egyptian god. And this is a problem I'm seeing on the regular as related to a lot of indie comics. And again, that's the major problem I have with Comicsgate as related to them. They all talk about being saviors to the industry, but they don't really want to go out here and talk about sharpening craft. No, they want to be the saviors of the industry. But as a publishing professional, I know that you're not going to save an industry if you don't have anybody who understands the foundation of craft. This is where I got a beef with Mark Millar, who wants to go out here and talk about, oh, we need 20 good writers on 20 books. No, you can't have 20 good writers if you don't have a good editorial staff to give them guidance, if you don't have a good editorial staff to set a direction, if you don't have those foundations, you're going nowhere as related to comics. And this is where I got a problem with him. Again, he's talking about, oh, that we're going to go out here and be able to save an industry, but you can't save an industry if you don't have any sort of leadership and you don't have anybody to set a course for your writers to give them guidance on the characters or have standards for them as related to doing their research. Again, this is where you've got a lot of people in the industry who don't know what they're doing. But again, the difference between me and them is I understand you got to have a foundation for your people with editorial so that they can go out here and set a course for the books that they're doing and set a solid course for them for the way that they do. I mean, you need that guy there to give people guidance like we had with Jim Shooter and Mark Grunwald over at Marvel and with Paul Levitz over at DC, because if you don't have somebody there to give your creators guidance, they're going to wind up getting lost. And as they wind up getting lost, this is where you get opportunists like the ones in Comicsgate, like Eric July, who want to come in and brand themselves as saviors. They want to come in here and brand themselves as saviors, hoping to try to sell people on their comics by saying, oh, my comic isn't woke. And again, that flash will get people's attention for a minute. But if you've got no substance whatsoever, then you're going to wind up, you may get some money in the short term, but you're not going to be able to go out here and build your business on the long term. So you got guys like Eric July who will talk about, oh, I'm inventing this Rippaverse line of comics, but I don't really see how these Rippaverse line of comics is going to change anything. I mean, I don't see where this Isom book is going to revolutionize anything based on what was presented in the pages of Isom. I mean, when I look at Isom, I look at this book and I really don't see anything in this book that shows me anything as related to substance that's going to get me to go out here and buy this book. I mean, yes, he's got this book, again, Isom talking about on the second book, oh, why did Isom quit, based on what was presented on the cover. But the thing is, we don't get any sort of presentation of that as related to this book from the beginning. Now, there's a major error here, again, as related to storytelling in the first page of Isom. I mean, this is a very passive opening. I mean, it doesn't tell us who the main character is or what they want. No, it just seems like, oh, it's just here for a minute. Fair use of copyright law, because I'm not really going too much into this book. But the whole thing is that we don't really get the lead character into this book until maybe, like, let me count how many pages it takes for us to get to the lead character. This is the first one. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 pages until Isom shows up. And that's way too many pages for a character to show up in a book. I mean, this is not the book that is going to be the revolution that people on the right say as related to mainstream comics. No, it's not going to be the book that's going to revolutionize comics if your writer doesn't have the skills as related to craft to understand. You're not going to be able to get readers into a book if the hero doesn't show up set until the 7th page. I mean, but as from my years of experience of going out here and buying comics, if I didn't see anything go on as related to action within the first 2 or 3 pages, as I was flipping it in the Forbidden Planet or at the bodega or at the cigar store, I was basically putting that book back on the shelf and moving on to something else. And when I look at Eric July's book, he's talking about, oh, this book is going to change everything. Well, I've read 2 Isom books, and I didn't see anything that was revolutionary there. No, I saw a guy who basically has no craft whatsoever. and no real skill as related to writing. And what I saw in the pages of his book as related to his pages basically told me a story of a writer who has no real experience and has not really done enough research as related to storytelling to understand how to make a story work inside of a comic book. I mean, when I look at Eric July's whole thing, yes, he's gone out here and made a lot of noise to get the attention of people on the right and the far right. But I don't see anything where comic fans are going to win. No, he talks about how we are going to win, but all I see are comic fans who wind up losing because they're not getting any quality on the page. And because they're not getting any quality on the page, what is happening with many comic fans is, yeah, you're paying $50 for an Isom book, but you're not getting anything as related to quality because this guy basically just, again, knows nothing about writing outside of writing on emotion. And writing on emotion, yeah, it will get your attention for a minute, but when you start seeing these structural errors as related to storytelling, that's when you're going to wind up looking at this book and saying, hey, there's some serious problems here. There's no real story here. There's no real direction here. I mean, as a writer, again, when I looked at that book, both of the books, they just got progressively worse because there was no craft as related to storytelling. And some of these folks out here, they don't understand that if you don't have any craft to your writing, yeah, you may get attention for a minute, but if you don't have any craft, you're not going to be able to build your audience, because if you don't have any sort of craft, then what's going to happen is the audience will read your first book, and then what's going to happen is the audience is going to drop off because they don't see that this character is a lead character. They don't see that this character has a mission. They don't see that this character has a reason for being in the book. And that's going to undermine your book overall. And it's going to make your book just fall completely apart. Because, I mean, when I look at the Isom book, and again, looking at this book, I mean, again, this book has no real mission. I mean, we got book number 1 where we get all of this so-called building a universe. But if you don't have the foundation and structure to build a universe, you're not going to be able to establish anything as related to a universe. Now, again, looking at the first Isom book, and we got passiveness because we don't get to see Avery until 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pages into the book. Again, very weak passive opening. And you can't do that when you're doing comics. No, in comics, you have to be active, and you have to be active because being active means that we get right into the story because you have to get the reader in as soon as possible. I mean, if we don't see the hero coming in the book and we don't see the mission of the character in the book, that's going to undermine your ability to retain your audience. And that's something I've learned for years from doing different books. I have to have that mission set up in that first book. I mean, that's what I did as related when I was starting all of my different series books like Isis, Esteem, and John Haynes. I mean, when I go out here and I'm doing a book, whether it be a prose book or a comic book, one of the things that I go out here and look to do is go out here and establish the mission of that character. And I establish that mission as soon as possible in the first book that I believe in every book that I do, because I understand a point that Jim Shooter made as related to entry points. And the point he made as related to entry points was he said every book has to be an entry point. And that's something that I go out here and make organic as related to all of my books, like John Haynes, A Conversation with Death. I mean, I remember back in 2018 when I did John Haynes, A Conversation with Death, what I did was I understood people never read a John Haynes book, even though the character had been around since 2011. I understood that I had to make this book an entry point for the new reader. And while action had taken place with John Haynes in 2011 with The Temptation of John Haynes, and with 2014 with Isis, Wrath of the Cyber Goddess, and with 2016 with Bride of Dracula and The Man Who Rules the World, I needed to make this book the first in the John Haynes series, one that a new reader could go out here and pick up and get to know the character. And as I was recapping everything that happened in all of the stories, I understood this book was going to be somebody's first book as related to John Haynes. So I made sure that to make this book very easy for everybody to follow. And what turned out was this was one of the biggest books as related to the John Haynes character. So I understood that when I came out here, I needed to make this book an entry point. And I make every book an entry point, whether it be an Isis series or an Esteem series book, or even one of my novels like those in the Spinsterella trilogy. I want to make every book an entry point because I understand that new readers are first picking up this character. And I only get one chance to make a strong first impression. And if I don't make that strong first impression on the reader, then what's going to happen is the readers are going to walk away, and they're going to walk away because I didn't go out here and do my job of going out here and introducing the main character, showing what they want to accomplish, and showing how obstacles were in their way, and most importantly, giving you a reason to care about that character. These are what a writer has to do within the first 3 to 5 pages of a comic book, or within the first 3 chapters of a book. And Eric July didn't do that with Isom. No, he got caught up in his feelings about the social justice warriors and making these so-called stories that were going to be so-called better than the stories of the so-called woke types, and didn't focus on the content of his stories or the content of his characters. And that is really what really undermines him as a creator. He's so caught up in trying to appeal to pandering to those on the right and the far right, and thinking that he is one, but he really has not won over the audience, because the audience is more than the far right or the right. This is something that I know as a publisher who's been around for the last decade or so. I understand that you have to go out here and make your stories appeal to everyone. And you have to go out here and understand that your stories have to go out here and resonate with the reader. This is something I try to do with books like John Haynes, A Conversation with Death, and many of my other books. I try to make sure that they can resonate and connect with the reader, because again, I know that you only get one chance to make a first impression. You only get one opportunity to make a first impression. And this is something that the people at Comicsgate and Eric July don't understand, because they're so caught up in trying to polarize the audience that what they don't understand is that you wind up leaving half the audience in a way to want going to go out here and buy your product. Because when you polarize the audience and make it all political, what happens is you have people who aren't buying your product. And when you polarize the audience, people aren't interested in buying your product because they are caught up in their feelings about politics or social justice. And this is what's happening with Comicsgate, and it's also happening with Eric July, and happening with what they call social justice warriors at Marvel and DC. And this is why the entire comic industry is not moving in either direction, whether it be Comicsgate or Eric July or Marvel or DC. And what we're seeing is a further decline as related to the overall comic book industry. Instead of people going out here and actively buying comic books, what they're doing is just not going. The regular people are pushing further away, and they will sit there and not buy the comics because there are things in the comics that they don't believe are something they find appealing to them. So while we have both of these sides going out here looking to try to separate from each other, we don't have anybody looking to bring people together. And that's one of the things I try to do as related to comics, because again, I love this medium of storytelling. And because I love this medium of storytelling, I want to bring people together and not really focus too much on politics. No, when I want to go out here, I just want to go out here and tell great stories. And I do that with many of my books. And I also do it with my comics like John Haynes at Death's Door. When I was doing John Haynes at Death's Door, again, nothing woke about this book, as many of the Comicsgate people and Eric July love to talk about. I mean, nothing what they call woke in this book at all. No, John Haynes at Death's Door basically is John Haynes taking on the Greek god of death in this story, basically an action story. And in that action story, I'm just showing a character who is Black going out here and taking on the Greek god of death in that story. And that's what I do in this story, is again just show you this character who's just out here taking on the Greek god of death. That's all that's in John Haynes at Death's Door, and that's what I put in this book back in 2022. I mean, that's all I wanted it to be. And again, it's a what people would call a non-woke book. But what I find to be interesting is I don't see any of these Comicsgate guys going out here talking about this book. No, never heard any of the Comicsgate guys talking about them. And that just showed me the irony of how political and politicized Comicsgate and guys like Eric July have become, that whenever people come out with really great books, they don't want to talk about those books at all or promote those books at all. No, they don't really talk about those books. They only talk about books that are from the so-called Comicsgate group, but they don't talk about other books from other independent creators. And that just shows how, as I'm seeing it, they are becoming more and more disingenuous as a group, and just shows me how disingenuous the overall indie comic scene has become, because you got a lot of people who say, oh, we want to see the industry change, but all I see are the sales dropping lower and lower, and I see less and less talk about craft. Now, if you guys want to pick up John Haynes at Death's Door, you can click the link in the Lulu from Lulu, and it'll take you to Lulu, and you can get your own copy of John Haynes at Death's Door. Something that I know from my own business as related to putting together print-on-demand books is to be able to get those books on a print-on-demand platform, so you guys can go out here and buy those books and not have to just be restricted to a crowdfunding project and be able to get these books whenever you want. That's what I do. Again, that's another difference between myself and Comicsgate, is I want to be able to get books out here and be able to get them accessible to readers. So that's something else I'm different about. And again, when I look at comics, again, my whole thing is I want to get comics in the hands of everyone. And I want to go out here and put together books that are PG-13, books that are family friendly, books that you would feel safe about having in front of your children, books that you would feel safe about sharing with your kids. And I've been doing this again for over a decade, and I've had people tell me about Isis, Esteem, and John Haynes books that they give them to their children. But that's the difference between me and the whole Comicsgate and Eric July, who say that they want to get comics in readers' hands, but I don't really see them talking about getting comics in young people's hands or getting books in young people's hands. No, my people out here, they'll go out here and give these books to their kids, and the kids will enjoy them. Again, that's a major difference between me and all of these guys on social media. I want to be able to reach that larger audience and reach that larger family audience. That's what I want to do as related to comics. And again, I'm not looking to go out here and look to be with any political position, like the left or the right, because I understand as a Black creator, both sides are anti-Black. But you'll have guys like Eric July, there are bootlicks who think, oh, if I go with these guys, they'll buy your book. Yes, they'll give you money in the short term, but they're only giving you money because they can use you as a shield to protect their political platforms. And again, I thought that comics weren't supposed to be political, but when I look at the whole thing with Eric July and Comicsgate, they are very political. And the only reason why they are going out here and are selling their books is because of the political positions that they have. And it's not about going out here and telling good stories. No, that's the difference between me and them. And I don't have, again, what they call bias against Eric July, except for his bootlicking and pandering to the far right. That's where I have an issue with him, because the only reason why he was out here on platforms like Fox News is because he would go out here and compromise himself to be in pictures with guys like Kyle Rittenhouse. And that is the main reason why we have so many in Comicsgate running to his aid. And again, showing the entire political position of Comicsgate, that it's not about the comics. No, it's all about the political agenda. And the political agenda is where they get somebody to go out here and promote their idea of diversity, which is ironic because the whole thing with Comicsgate is they said they don't like the diversity. But the whole thing is that they are out here with a guy who basically is building an entire universe with the black character who is a token in the background of his own book. And that's the whole irony of Isom, is that the Isom character is not as active as I have John Haynes. I mean, when I do books like John Haynes at Death's Door, you see the black character as the lead. You see the black character as the center focus. You see the black characters as having power. But when you look at Isom, it's a book where the black characters are in the background. And the thing that Comicsgate likes to do is use the excuse to say, oh, this character is building a world. Well, I have built the world of the SJS Direct universe. And as I've built the world of the SJS Direct universe, with the Isis, Esteem, and John Haynes books, all of the characters have been front and center in their own books. I mean, John Haynes is center in his book. Isis is in center in her book. Esteem is center in her book. And I'm able to build a world of characters and a universe of characters. And the lead characters are able to carry their own stories, very different than what you see in Isom, because in Isom, you see the lead character, and he's in the background of his own book, and everybody else is shown as having more power than he has. And that really, for a black creator, it just makes me shake my head. Here you are spending your money to be in the background of your own book and not seeing how that's going out here and showing you from a position of weakness as a creator, because a strong creator is going to put their lead characters at the forefront, and they're going to do that because it shows the confidence of that creator as related to their ability to be a storyteller. So a storyteller, when you're out here and you've got a lead character, your lead character is going to be front and center, and they're going to be front and center because you want people to know who the main character is. You want people to know what this character wants, which is their mission, what is the obstacles in front of them, and most importantly, why should we care? That's what you're going to want in the first 3 to 5 pages of your comic. You're not going to have the lead character buried to the back like Isom was. I mean, when I read those 2 Isom books, he's in the background of his book, and the white characters are made to appear to be the stronger characters, and that's not good writing at all. But you'll have guys in Comicsgate going out here and saying, oh, this is the greatest book that was ever done. No, it wasn't very good at all. The first book was rough and uneven. The second book was a complete jumbled mess of plot threads worthy of Chris Claremont back in the 1980s when his craft basically fell off. And you have guys in Comicsgate being disingenuous, saying that this is a great book, being, as I see it, dishonest. And I don't see how comic fans are winning. No, I don't see how comic fans are winning as related to Eric July. I don't see how you're winning while he's saying, oh, I got 15,000 sales. Well, as somebody who's been in this business and been a fan of this business since he was 4 years old, 15,000 people ain't even a apartment complex in the housing projects in the South Bronx. I mean, 15,000 people basically would fill the Butler houses down on Webster Avenue. I mean, that's not something that I would say is any sort of success. Back when I could consider going back to a 1950s era of Superboy and Lois Lane, and those books were selling 500,000 copies, or even go back to the 90s when X-Men #1 sold 1,000,000 copies, and the days when you had books like Spider-Man and the Incredible Hulk selling over 500,000 copies. I mean, and even you had books like Iron Man selling 250,000 copies. I mean, I look at that and go, you're saying that's a success? No, it's not at all. No, that's not even a drop in the bucket. And again, shows how bad the comic book industry has become. I mean, when I look at the numbers, again, you're saying that, oh, you're trying to change things, but I don't see how anything is changing for the better. We've gone from 5 years into this whole thing with Comicsgate, and I don't see where you're making any sort of progress, and you're not making any sort of progress because we don't have any sort of focus on craft. And a lot of the indie books that I see out here, yes, there are some really good ones. Yeah, there are some good ones, but we don't see a spotlight shined on them to get more readers to them. One. Two, we don't have any focus on helping people develop their craft. And three, we don't really have any sort of focus on trying to go out here and look to build an audience based on the so-called merits that Comicsgate says it's all about. Now, again, this is another talking point that Comicsgate and Eric July love to talk about books being all about merit. Okay, you're saying books are all about merit, but whenever somebody criticizes one of these books for being bad, that's when a lot of these guys get upset. But if you're in this business, you need to understand that if your book is bad, this is not somebody trying to attack you as related to so-called politics. This is somebody critiquing you based on the merits of the material you presented. This is where I had an issue with Concrete Comics a while back, critiquing their books based on the merits of their material, but they couldn't take it at all. And the same thing with many of the Eric July file acolytes. They couldn't take the criticism. But the whole thing is, people can only go and review based on what you present on your page. And again, we go back to your page. And again, your page is important whenever it comes to your comics. Whenever you're doing a comic out here, when you do a comic, your page is going to be your calling card. And if your pages aren't strong, your pages are not going to be the thing that are going to allow you to go out here and be able to sell your work. And that's the thing that's gotten lost on guys like Eric July and many of the creators of Comicsgate. They really have not focused on their craft to focus on, hey, my page needs to be strong. My page needs to be active. My page needs to be something that grabs people within a few seconds. I mean, that is the skill of a writer. A writer has to be able to go out here and be able to get their page and have their page be strong. And their page has to be strong enough to go out here and really get people's attention. Your page, again, is the thing that's going to be your calling card, and your page has to, again, sell your work. That is something that I have learned, again, over my 20 years as a guy who has studied related to the novel, studied as related to developing screenplays, and also learned as I was learning comic book writing. And I can do that with books like either John Haynes or Death's Door, or I did it with Esteem No Good Deed, which I went out here and in one page, go out here and try to answer 3 questions just on the first page splash. which is who is the main character, what do they want, and most importantly, why should we care? So on the first page from Esteem No Good Deed that I did with Bill Walko, I wanted to say, okay, Esteem is at this store and she's looking to buy a dress. And what happens on that first page is I establish her character. And on the next page, I establish the conflict, which is the robbery. Again, establishing what's going to happen in less than 2 pages and gets you into the story almost immediately. Again, I understand as a creator who understands craft, I don't have much time to go out here and get the reader's attention because the reader is going to be possibly in a comic shop or on the internet, and they've got multiple tabs open if they're on the internet, or if they are at the comic shop, there are multiple books they're looking at. So I don't have much time to get my story out there and get your attention. So I understand I got to be able to condense the story and get your attention as soon as possible. So this is something that I don't really see, again, a lot of Comicsgate guys doing out here, again, as related to craft, understanding how important it is to get your story told in as few pages as possible. Because when I see a guy like Eric July talking about he got 7, 8, 9 pages and the hero pops up, that really doesn't show me a book that's going to revolutionize the industry. No, it's not showing me anything revolutionary, because this just shows me, again, that these guys, while they talk about how they're going to change the industry, they have the lack of experience as related to craft of storytelling that they complain that the so-called SJW woke writers have, because any good writer understands that they have to get their story told in less than 3 pages or 5 pages. And when you look at something like a manga, they get right into the action. When you look at a scholastic book, they get right into the action. They don't waste any time. There's no wasted material. No, they get right into the action of that story because they understand that they have to compete as related to the marketplace. And the faster the reader gets into the story, the faster you can go out here and make a sale. That's something that you have to understand. And Juwan makes a good point that people have a short attention span. So you have to really focus on condensing your story and grabbing people's attention. And that's what I tried to do here with the Esteem No Good Deed story. I understood I only had 3 pages to get people in. I needed a strong splash to get your attention. Then I needed to make sure that the action was solid as related to the page and set up the conflict. And then after I set up the conflict, then we get the hero stepping into action. Again, just 3 pages were in, and I didn't see that again with Eric July, where he's basically, again, taking all of these pages. And you can't do that when you're in the business of comics, because the book that's in people's hands is the one that's going to get sold and sell the next book. That's another thing, that difference between me and Comicsgate and Eric July, as I understand, you only get one chance at a first impression. You only get one chance to sell your book. You only get one chance to go out here and sell that work. And the book that you have in people's hands, that's the book that's going to sell all of your back books and going to sell your front books. Because, again, everything is about what you put on your pages. Everything is about what you present to the reader. And you can go out here and talk all about SJWs and woke, but the whole thing is, it's your craft that is the thing that's going to sell you. The thing is that your craft is the thing that's going to get you readers and build your word of mouth. And that's the difference between me and Comicsgate and Eric July, is I focus on craft because I understand that you can talk a good game in the short term and get people's attention in the short term. But in the long term, if your craft isn't there, you're not going to be able to sell books in the long term, because what's going to sell your books is your page and what's on that page, your ability to tell that story on that page. That's the thing that's going to sell your your books, and that's the thing that's going to sell you to readers. That is what the 50% of the business when it comes to comics is. 50% of it is partially going to be your page. And again, your page is the thing that's going to go out here and sell you. I mean, your page, again, is 50% of it as related to the comics you produce. I mean, your page is going to be 50% of it, but the other 50% is going to be you. And part of what I see, what happens with Comicsgate and Eric July is, again, they leave money on the table by alienating a lot of the customers by not going out here and looking to sell books to the largest audience. And they don't let the customer get to know them. That's one of the reasons why I came to YouTube in the first place. Was as a blogger, I had been doing the Shawn James Black Freelance Writer blog for over about 5 or 6 years. And I saw that the blog had gotten 2 to 3 million hits. And once it hit 2 to 3 million hits, I realized I was only going to be able to go but so far as related to promoting books with the blog. And that's why I decided to move over to YouTube. And I wanted people to get to know me. And I wanted to get them to get to know me as a man. And what I was looking to do was show what type of values and character I presented as a man on these platforms. And I wanted to show consistency as related to my actions and my character. This is who I am in real life. You're talking to the real me right now, and you're sitting there and you're with the real me. So that's the difference between me and these Comicsgate guys and Eric July. Again, I'm genuinely me myself. And again, when it comes to comics, I really truly care about this medium. I care about the craft of storytelling. And this is the thing that I want to share with people, again, as related to storytelling. Because to me, it's not about social justice warriors having control over Marvel or DC. No, it's about people learning craft. And yeah, these guys talk about their politics. And again, they do this because there's no editor there with experience to check these individuals. And if you don't have an editor there to check these individuals and let them know they need to stay focused on the mission of these characters, then you're not really having anybody leading these companies. And what I see with Comicsgate and Eric July and many others is that they are just as lost as the social justice warriors they talk about, because they are not really focused on craft. And that's why comics have not changed for the better in the last 5 years. No, in the last 5 years, we've seen comic sales continue to decline, and we see it decline because there's no focus on passing down skills. No, we have people polarized, talking about woke, talking about, oh, this comic is far left. And yes, there are comics that are far left, but there are even worse books, like when I talked about Dynamite Comics Victory. I mean, Dynamite Comics Victory was one of the worst books I read because of the lack of craft. I mean, this book basically had absolute, like Isom had a black character in a book with no story, a book with no actual plot, had chicken scratch art, and all because editorial did not have any standards and did not want to bring the best to the table. I mean, one of the things I want to do when I do comics is I want to bring the very best to the table. And I want to bring the very best to the table, like with this Esteem No Good Deed comic I did in the Blast from the Past book. I want to give you the very best because this comic is a reflection of me. And again, it all, as I see it, basically starts with the script. I mean, Bill Walko or Antonio Balderi or any artist I work with can only work with what I give them. And that's the thing that flies over the heads of guys in Comicsgate and guys like Eric July, is that it all starts with the script. And if your script isn't solid, then you're not going to get a solid comic that will be made from the script that you make. The art that is presented is based on the script you provide, and that's where you have to lay your foundation, because it's your script that is the thing that is going to be your calling card. And again, when I look at Eric July's Isom, the writing just isn't there. I mean, he's got this book. He's touting it as a savior. Same thing with Comicsgate. They tout it as the savior, but I don't really see it saving anything as related to things because there's no real craft on the page and there's no real craft because everybody's writing from emotion. Moreover, you have a lot of people caught up in the covert contract where they believe that their book is going to again be the savior of the comic book industry. They believe that their book is going to go out here and save comics like they believe Giant Size X-Men #1 did, Amazing Fantasy #1 did, the way they believe Fantastic Four #1 did. But no, it took years for those books to build their audience. That's what people aren't told that I know from my own experience publishing my own books like The Temptation of John Haynes. I know that it takes years for a book to finally start finding its audience, and it may take several stories for a book to find its readers. So a creator has to be extremely patient, and a creator has to be extremely patient because it takes time for readers to discover a work, and it takes time for readers to find a work. And it may take a long time for them to do that. But many of these people, they think, oh, this guy had the success early on. But I've seen many people who had success early on go into decline because they did not really, again, develop their foundations of craft or take their time to put together a quality book to follow up the next book. Because I remember when I did Temptation of John Haynes in 2011, I really wanted to run out here and do Man Who Rules the World. And I had the original plot where John Haynes was supposed to take on the block for Man Who Rules the World. And I just sat on that idea because I said it wasn't strong enough. And I sat on that book. I published John Haynes in 2011. And then I wanted to come right back out in 2013, but then I decided to stop. And because I said the story isn't coming together. And what I did was I sat on that story until my mother got sick about in 2016. And then I finally was able to write Man Who Rules the World. And once I wrote Man Who Rules the World, I had the John Haynes sequel I wanted, but I didn't use the block story. No, I understood that a drug dealer versus a CEO wasn't a strong enough story. So instead, what I did was set that up to be the opening act of the inciting incident, but then led into the Godcacious character. And that led to one of the biggest stories that really laid the foundation for the John Haynes character. And I'm glad that I did that because, again, sometimes you have to sit on a story and not rush it out. Because if you rush out a story, you go out here and you make a sloppy story that really will undermine your character and really turn off a lot of people. So that's what I did with that story. Again, I just sat down and held off on it. And then after I did Man Who Rules the World, later on, I came out about 2018 with John Haynes, A Conversation with Death, after he was in Bride of Dracula. And Bride of Dracula was huge for the John Haynes character. That book basically put the John Haynes character over. But I understood sometimes you just have to sit on a character for a minute and sit on a story for a while. Yeah, there will be people out here who will be saying, oh, you need to come out with the next book, but you need to come out with something of quality. And that's something I don't see a lot of indie guys doing because a lot of them are rushing books out. But I'd rather just take my time and put together something really solid and have something that will really be strong rather than rush something out of the poorest quality. Because when you rush stuff out of the poorest quality, what happens is the customers are the ones who are going to get turned off. And I believe that after reading Isom #2, a lot of people are going to get turned off by that jumbled mishmash of plot threads because people will say, okay, yeah, this guy talks about winning. He talks about how his books are going to be revolutionary, but I don't really see it on the page. And you have to have it on the page. And if you have to hold out for 6 months to a year, it's better to hold out for 6 months to a year or even 2 years. Or in the case of what I did with John Haynes, where I sat there for 5 years, just hold off on bringing that character back until you got something that's solid to show that this character is somebody you need to pay attention to. I mean, I would rather go out here and put something out here that's clear to the mission of a character that keeps them consistent rather than go out here and rush something out that is half done. Because if you rush something out half done, then you're going to wind up, again, damaging the character and damaging your brand. And that's what's happened to the Rippaverse right now. The brand is, as I see it, suffered damage because he tried to cram so many characters in. And I was looking at one of his tweets where he's saying he's adding more characters for Isom #3. And this is a problem that was there. I mean, he's trying to add more characters, but I know from experience, the more characters you add, it creates clutter, and a cluttered book is harder to read. So a good writer wants to, again, keep their characters down to maybe about 4 or 6 per story. You don't want to have a lot of characters in a story because it creates clutter and it makes it hard for the reader to follow the story. So oftentimes when I'm writing stories, I try to keep the clutter down to a minimum, and I try to work with maybe 4, 6 characters at the maximum. I don't really like to have a lot of characters in a story because it creates clutter and, again, confuses readers. You really don't want to have a lot of characters. You want to keep your story very tight. And again, this is all the things you learn about craft, and you have to learn about craft before you start doing comics. I mean, Zken asks the question, how do I feel about books without dialogue? I don't have a problem with books without dialogue. I mean, I remember looking at some art Bill Walkaway posted on Facebook, and he did an amazing job of telling a story without any dialogue. I mean, a good artist, when they have a good script, then they have a book with no dialogue. You can follow what's going on. And if you have your story really solid, people will read between the lines of the action. So if your writing is solid, you can go out here and do a book like that. And this is what you can do. So Aaron Blaylock asks, is he creating his own characters? Yeah, Eric July is creating his own characters and paying staff to create his own books. But the sad part is he just is making a lot of mistakes as related to writing, as he's looking to, again, try to sell to the Comicsgate audience, which I was out here thinking, oh, this book is going to be revolutionary. I look at this book from a creator perspective and as somebody who has been reading comics since he was 4 years old, and I see nothing different in his book than what I saw back in the 80s in the black and white craze, because back in the 80s, in the black and white craze, we had a lot of guys out here who were saying, oh, we're going to beat Marvel and DC. And I've seen so many companies fall by the wayside. I mean, I can talk about comic companies I've seen fall by the wayside that had really great books. I mean, Now Comics had some fantastic books. First Comics had some great books. They're no longer with us. Eclipse had Miss Tree, which was one of the best series featuring a woman in a mystery. I mean, so many great companies have come and gone that were just out here looking to make some money. And none of them really talked about beating Marvel and DC. And anybody who is about their craft isn't about looking to beat Marvel or DC. No, a person who's about their craft is about their passion, and they're about going out here and looking to hone and improve their craft. That is something I am about. And again, this is why I was reading books like Sid Field's screenplay and Robert McKee's story, because I want to improve my craft as a writer. I want to further develop my skills as a writer. And as a publisher, I want to go out here and put together work that is of the highest standard. And I want to be able to put up work that when people look at it, go, hey, that Shawn James, he puts together some quality stories. He puts together some really solid storytelling. His characters are just well done. That is what I want to do as a creator. I mean, I want to be able to appeal to the largest audience, whether they be left or right, or in people all across the globe. And that's something I've done when I was out here giving away books for free. I was reaching people all over the world and doing that, just basically just going out here with my fiction and nonfiction, understanding that, hey, it's not about anybody's politics. It's just about storytelling. And if you're a great storyteller, your story is going to resonate with people. And that's what I want my stories to resonate, because for me, winning is about the story resonating with the reader to the point where they're getting so excited that they want to go out here and share that book with their friends. That to me is winning, because you're building the word of mouth as related to your storytelling that lets people know that your writing is connecting with them. And that's my ultimate goal as a writer, is to connect with the largest audience. I want to connect with people with my stories, and I also want to connect with them as a person, because I understand, again, selling just ain't about what's on the page. It's also about the author connecting with people. It's about the artist connecting with people. It's about making the story relate to people. That's something I have been doing, trying to do for years. Even when I'm in the days when I was drawing my own covers, which weren't looking that great, I just wanted to, again, show my skills as a writer. And again, this is the difference between me and Eric July and Comicsgate and all these other individuals, is for me, this is about passion and purpose. This is about going out here and reaching the largest audience. It is not about, oh, we're going to go out here and prove something to the so-called social justice types or try to show how it's not woke. No, it's not about trying to show how it's not woke. It's about trying to go out here and show your very best work to people and bring your very best work to the table and show your skills as related to craft. That is what I want to bring to the table with every SJS Direct book or every SJS Direct comic. I mean, when I go out here, I put every best effort out there because, again, I know that this a comic or whatever book I produce is a reflection of me. It is my calling card. It is sending the message to people about my work. And sometimes, yeah, in my novels, there will be a typo here or there, but rest assured, I have gone out here and read that book about 50 to 100 times, and I'm just one man, but I understand that I've got to bring my best to the table, and that's not something you hear Comicsgate or Eric July talking about. No, it's all about the other guy. No, when you're producing comics or books, it's all about what you want to present, and everything you present is a reflection of you. It is a reflection of your standards. It's a reflection of your process. And that's the issue I have with Eric July as related to Isom. I mean, this book, again, it's not really good. It's really sloppy and just not really structured very well. And I'm not really seeing any sort of technique as related to storytelling. No, I see a very sloppy book that doesn't know what it wants to be. I mean, in the first book, I'm trying to figure out, does this want to be a superhero book, a detective book? I mean, when I look at guys like Mike Williams with Deke Sledge, I know from the first page it's a mystery. I mean, when Mike dropped the Deke Sledge and he showed it to me, I went all the way back to the first one, and we get the mystery set up in the first strip, and that's skill right there. And you've got to use your skills, again, to set up your story, because, again, you only get one chance to make a first impression, and that first impression is the one that, again, is the difference between you selling your one book or you being able to sell an entire series. And a lot of times I go out here and I would put up a book like an ISIS or a Scheme book, and what would happen is, in some cases, people would go out here and pick up the entire run from reading one story. Same thing with the John Haynes series. I would have people read one story, for whether it be an older series or a later series, and they would, again, pick up the entire run. And when I did John Haynes at Death's Door, and people bought the comic, people were buying the back books. And that's what can happen if you focus on your craft. And that's something, again, I don't see anybody who's talking about these indie comics talking about is craft. And it's really lacking, because I'm looking at a lot of books, and some of them are having craft problems. And a lot of these creators do need that guidance as related to craft, because a lot of guys out here, they need to learn more about craft, because craft is the thing that's going to help you improve your skills and help you to make your next book better. I mean, I remember the book Savage Sin that I had bought had very interesting heroine, but the whole thing is they put her in the back of the book. And I talked about that in a review, and it was because the book had that way was executed wrong. It made it disjointed. And again, you have to watch that kind of stuff. And again, I don't see anybody in Comicsgate talking about craft, nor do I see them talking about further helping people improve their craft. No, it's all SJW, woke, and people are really getting tired of this. Because I remember watching a tweet from one of these guys on social media where they said that the view counts on these videos is starting to decline. And that's something that should trouble many of these Comicsgate guys because they said, oh, we want to save the industry. Well, the industry is at the point where people are becoming indifferent, and they're becoming indifferent because they're seeing that these individuals, while they talk about, oh, they want to improve the industry, they're not really seeing anything as related to change. And that's what's leading to the viewership numbers declining. I mean, this is something I've seen myself. When I go out here and do comic videos, the numbers are lower. So I have to oftentimes do what the person said on Twitter and supplement it with another video to get the views. But what's happening is that the industry, again, overall, the whole comics YouTube environment is declining. And as it declines, it's because people have no reason to care because they're not really seeing any sort of change as related to quality, whether it be with the mainstream books or the independent books. And that's the difference between me and them, is that I want to, again, improve the quality of the craft, and I want to improve the quality of the craft because I know if you don't improve the quality of the craft, you're not going to get the readers who want to build the word of mouth for those books or build the viewers for the YouTube videos, because you can only make so many videos complaining about woke and social justice before the audience gets tired of it. And 5 years of this, people are basically at that breaking point where they're tired of it. They're tired of hearing about social justice. They're tired of hearing about woke. No, what they want to hear is somebody talking about improving the quality, helping people develop their skills, and helping people develop their craft. I mean, this is why so many people have moved on to manga, because they see nothing is changing about comics. And again, that's the difference between me, is I understand that in order to get to change, you have to go out here and understand that you have to develop your skills and your craft, and you have to become a better storyteller, a storyteller who can go out here and quickly get the reader into the story. It's not about the politics. I mean, you can go for so long with politics, but if people see it's the same thing over and over again, it's like the definition of insanity. You are doing the exact same thing and expecting a different result, and the results aren't changing in comics. And again, this is where Comicsgate is in a bad place, and guys like Eric July are in a bad place. They have talked about woke to the point where people are just tired of it, and what they want to do is move on because they see nothing is changing. So people are getting ready to move on. What's going on, Keating Rourke? Glad to see you here. I decided to talk about the difference between myself, Eric July, and Comicsgate in this live stream. And I wanted to show the difference between myself and them, because some people think, oh, I have a grudge against Eric July. And I wanted to show that it's not about him. It's about the craft and the product he's producing and the products that Comicsgate pushes. Again, a lot of these guys talk a good game about, oh, we are out here looking for great comics. Well, I have that aren't woke. Well, I have John Haynes at Death's Door that isn't woke, but I ain't heard from none of these Comicsgate guys. So it really shows me it's not about the comics. It's about the politics. And I see so many other great small indie creators putting together a whole thing talking about, oh, it's all about the comics, but I see small indie creators out here putting together great work. I mean, guys like Raymond Leonard with Agent Solo and many others out here putting together fantastic comics, but nobody talks about those comics. Nobody talks about getting the word out about those people who have great passion and great heart. I mean, Raymond Leonard has so much heart. I mean, this man has a love for comics, and if I was running Marvel or DC, he would have a job in an instant. I mean, I see so much great talent out here, but according to the Comicsgate guys and Eric July, everybody's woke, everybody's bad. It's like, no, there are really great books out there. Like I just did 2 reviews of. I did a review of the Calamity Jane comic. I did a review of the Christine comic. I do reviews of all of the great comics out there by indie creators. But we won't see this from many of the comics YouTube channels who won't go out here and shine a light on that talent. I mean, I go out here and I talk about books like Corey Hardiman's Sister Mercy, fantastic book, and many other great books. So much great talent out there, but that talent doesn't get a showcase from Comicsgate or any of these individuals who are out here looking to get views complaining about the industry, but complaining about the industry is looking like it's a revenue stream that's about to dry up. And that's what's showing up now because the comic videos aren't really pulling the money that they used to because people are tired of hearing about complaining. No, they want to hear solutions. And I'm the guy who's like, I know this craft. I've been studying this craft as a writer. I want to improve in my craft as a writer. And when I do live streams, I want people to learn to become better writers. When I do comic review videos, it's about showing love for the craft and showing love for the stories and showing love for the entire process and sharing that love the same way a chef shares their love and passion for cooking. I mean, I have that passion for writing, and that's why when I go out here and do the review videos, I do them because I love comics and I want to see people go out here and enjoy comics. And again, that's the difference between me and Comicsgate and guys like Eric July. I bring a love for comics to comics, and I want to see those creators go out here and grow in their craft. And I've had creators basically drop in the comment section and say, hey, thank you for letting me know about that. Thank you for letting me get some perspective on that. I mean, not everybody got upset like Concrete Comics or some other creators. A lot of creators will be out here being appreciative, saying, hey, you're really helping me develop my skills, helping me develop my storytelling ability. I need that feedback because that's going to help me get better. That's what I get from a lot of people when I do the review videos. Now, these videos don't get a lot of views, but I do them because, again, I have a great love for comics. And that's why I went out here and decided to do this stream. I mean, I had a whole other live stream planned where I was going to talk about the difference between dating and courting. And I may do that one with Mr. Chris next week. I mean, Mr. Chris and I want to set him up to be a guest for next week's show. And that may be the topic I do with him because it's a topic I really want to get into about the difference between dating and courting and really let women and men know that there is a big difference between dating and courting. But this was a live stream. I know I wasn't going to get many viewers on, but I did it because of the passion and love that I have for comics. And I wanted to show the difference between myself, a guy like Eric July and Comicsgate, who, again, these guys talk about they want to sell comics. Well, I want to sell comics. And part of me wanting to sell comics is recommending good books from indie creators, recommending good books when they come out from Marvel and DC, letting people know where the good books are so that they will know what the good books are all about and be able to find ways to get those books and also help other creators go out here and find ways to get their books to them outside of Kickstarters and Indiegogos. I want to be able to help them understand, yeah, there needs to be a print on demand platform so that the books can sell for you so that you don't have to be going out here and taking days out of your day to go to the post office. The book can be shipped directly to you the way that I do for John Haynes at Death's Door. I mean, for John Haynes at Death's Door, the reason why I have it over at Lulu, you guys can click a link to the chat, is so that you guys can go out here and buy those books on your time and be able to buy those books and enjoy and be able to pick them up without having to go and wait for a Kickstarter. That's something I learned from working with print on demand publishing. I wanted to be able to get those books to you guys immediately. And that's something that I try to do because, again, I don't want to be having you guys have to wait to get to the for me to get to the post office. I want you guys to understand that the book is there. You guys can pick it up when you want and be able to get the books when you want and at your time. Again, this is the difference between me and Comicsgate and Eric July is, again, he talks about warehouses. And as I see it, I don't need a warehouse. I've been doing print on demand for over a decade. And again, I understand if the story is good, the customers will come buy the books and the customers will come pick up the books and at their time. So I want to go out here and again get books in readers' hands. And I know that most people buy their books online and they buy their books from digital platforms. So I try to go to those platforms so that they can go out here and get their books out there and and get them to the marketplace. Yeah, I'll critique your book, Aaron Blaylock, if you guys make a book. I mean, I've had people come to me with their comics. I mean, the guys from Sigma Comics came to me with Here Comes Calico, and I did reviews of almost all the books in their miniseries. And they had one book that had an issue, and they took the criticism and worked to improve their books. I mean, I do take reviews from people if as related to their books. Again, I truly care about comics and I want to see comics get in readers' hands. I want to see good books get in readers' hands. So that's why I do reviews. It's not about cooking and roasting the SJW creators. It's about showing you where the mistakes are so you can improve. That's something that I try to do because as a guy who has studied a lot of writing, I went out here and gave readers the feedback that they writers the feedback that they need and artists the feedback that they need because I know that they want to improve in their craft. And there's a lot of guys out here, yeah, they are passionate about comics, but they want to learn more about things. And the insular nature of the comic book industry makes it where people aren't able to learn. I mean, this is a problem that I'm seeing with the industry. Again, is we've got a lot of people who want to play the gatekeeper or the whisper network. But if you want to make this medium survive, you've got to let people in and let them get to know you, let them get to know your skills as a craftsperson. And you've got to go out here and share the knowledge and the passion you have, because that's what's really lacking about this business is you got a lot of people who lack that passion to share the craft. No, they want to go out here and attack the SJW, but they don't want to share experience about craft because the whole thing about these inexperienced people is they need an experienced person to give them guidance, to let them know, hey, you can't write on your feelings. You can't go out here making everything political. No, this is a business and we are making commercial characters. And if we want to make stories, the stories have to be compelling. So this is something that I'm seeing again with a lot of these so-called SJW comic pros and the Comicsgate pros. I don't really see them looking to build a bridge like I want to do and get people learning more about the craft of the business. I mean, for me, the craft of the business is the most important thing, and teaching that business and passing down proper skills, this is really important to me. As a publisher, I want to pass down those skills so that you can learn about different things. And that's what I wanted to do. And again, I just wanted to take a minute to let everybody know the difference between myself and Eric July's and the Comicsgate. Again, I love comics. I want to see comics grow. And I know that it's not just the industry that is comics. Comics is a skill and a craft. And that's what's really being lost as related to the entire medium of comics is the craft. A lot of the older people like George Perez, Neil Adams, John Romita, and Keith Giffen have passed away. And there's nobody to pass on that knowledge. And we've got a lot of people who are too caught up in their politics and caught up in the past to think about sharing comics to new creators so that they can learn about the future. That's what I want to do as a creator of comics, is share it with you. And it's something that I wanted to do again and share my whole different perspective as related to comics. I wanted to take a whole live stream to do this, and I wanted to share this with you in this live stream. And I wanted hope to give everybody a better understanding of my passion for comics and what makes is the difference between me and Comicsgate and Eric July. What's the difference is again, my passion and my craft for comics and all the work that I've learned to become a writer. That's the difference between me and them, is I've got a whole skill set that I have learned for over 25 years. And it's that skill set that I want to bring to comics. And it's something that I wanted to bring to everyone as related to comics, because with the comics I showed you, John Haynes at Death's Door and Esteem No Good Deed, I wanted to put craft on the pages of those books. And right now, I'm looking to work on my next comic. I want to be able to do all the characters in the SJS Direct universe in separate books. And the only one I haven't done is the ISIS book. And right now, I'm trying to do the raising the funds of that book and doing the logistics for whatever story I'm trying to do. So that's what I'm trying to do right now. And and it's something that I'm working on right now. Thank you, Kevin Lips, for the super chat. Really appreciate it. He says, thank you, Shawn, for creating a better image for the Black community, even though I'm not really much in the comic books. Well, thank you for the super chat and thank you for the kind words. I try to present a positive image of Black manhood and Black masculinity and an example of Black manhood to everyone. That's all part of my mission as related to SJS Direct. And it's, again, it's a part of my own personal image. And it's something that it's, again, about me, because I want to create a positive image of Black manhood and Black masculinity and positive stories about the Black experience. That's what I do with the SJS Direct imprint, and that's what I put in most of my work. And again, there's nothing woke or political about that. I just want to show you a Black person who is positive, and I want to show you a positive image of Black people. That's, again, the difference between me and Eric July in Comicsgate is I go out here and try to represent positivity. Again, my books are not about politics. They're about empowering and uplifting people. And I've reached people all over the world with my kind of storytelling. And I'm hoping that this video will help people understand what my mission is as a comic creator. Now, I'm going to get ready to wrap up tonight's stream. And if you guys want to check out my first full comic, John Haynes at Death's Door, you can find it on lulu.com right now for the same price it was on the 2022 Kickstarter. And you can get your own copy and check out the pages I put together for this comic. And you can also get my comic I did with Bill Walko, Esteem No Good Deed. You can get that book on Kindle right now for just 99 cents. And you can get that book and check out the first full story that I did with Bill Walko and the first full Esteem story. Now, I want to go out here and put together an ISIS comic book, and I can only do that with your help. So if you guys can go out here and drop a donation to the Cash App or the PayPal, that will help me get that much further to that goal of being able to raise the funds to put together that comic. So if you guys can go out here and drop a PayPal donation, that will help me further get closer to the goal of being able to finance this comic and being able to pay the artist to go out here and put together the art for the script of either Isis All That Glitters or Isis the Beauty Myth or maybe even Isis Bride of Dracula. I have been working on this book, and I can only get that book to a project for crowdfunding or on sale with your help. So if you guys could go drop a donation to the Cash App, that will help me get further. And if you want to pick up some of the books on the SJS Direct imprint, like John Haynes 1987 and John Haynes Godbreaker, you can find both of these books in paperback and Kindle format on Amazon.com. And these are part of the SJS Direct universe. And every book in the SJS Direct universe is an entry point. So you'll have no problem picking up any story in the SJS Direct universe at any time, and you won't feel lost. So I'm going to get ready to wrap up tonight's stream. It's 1 o'clock in the morning here in New York. And I really want to thank everybody for coming out to tonight's stream. I really appreciate you guys coming out and spending time with me in the night or the morning, wherever you are. Everybody have a good evening, and everybody have a good night.